Hello and welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, brought to you by Campbell's new Chunky Spicy Soup. It's time to get fired up. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review the show. I'm your host, Wayne Blue. We have been off basically for the past week as the NBA has also taken its All-Star break. The Raptors return to action tonight, which means the Raptors Show returns to action this afternoon. Blake Murphy, so programming out, Blake Murphy, co-host, is on hiatus for the next 2 weeks, and so in the meantime, I'm going to have a rotating panel of friends to help co-host the show. So for today, Thursday, and also tomorrow, Friday, we have Big V, Vivek Jacob, joining us. Anyone listening to this show for a long time understands who you are, but V, what's going on, man? What do you want to say to the people?
I want to say, hey, man, ready for this final stretch, final third of the season. Let's get into it.
You sound so excited, man.
It's going to be tough, but I think it's about wins and lessons. We're in that mode right now. And so Scotty's development, IQ's development, RJ, and you go down the line. That's what we're looking for. And,
Grady, Jordan Wara.
Yeah.
Ochai. Yeah, Ochai, Anybody? You're right, man. I mean, look, listen. Darko did talk at practice yesterday, and we'll actually get to some of his quotes. We're also going to get to, speaking of practice from yesterday, an interview that I did with Garrett Temple. I'll play that around 2:30. But Darko did say that they're still trying to win and still go for the play-in and hopefully get to the playoffs. Now, I mean, they're like 6 games behind that right now, even just to get to the play-in. But, I don't know. I mean, in the meantime, it is going to be about the growth of the players. And so, I mean, I think one of the big key growths coming into the season was just how Scotty was going to do. Scotty is clearly taking a step up. We saw him at All-Star Weekend. We didn't get a chance to cover it on this show, and I know it's already like kind of in the past, but did you just real quickly have a favorite moment from Scotty at All-Star Weekend?
Well, there's the flipping the ball behind his back from half court.
That was, that was pretty funny. I like that.
No, I think for him to come out in the All-Star game and have a good performance, get some dunks in, knock down a pull-up 3, show that, he's been working on that, and that's kind of the biggest piece of his development that we've seen this season and how far that's come along. I think it was nice for him to show that off a little bit. And, I think overall just to finish the game with 16 and 8 and have positive vibes coming out of that. And just to experience All-Star Weekend as an All-Star as opposed to, being in the rookie game and whatnot. I think that feeling of maybe being around those players and saying, hey, I don't want this to just be a one-time thing. I want to make this a regular thing. And having a chance to mesh with those players is going to be huge for him going forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was really fun to see him have a lot of fun. I think more than anything else, right? All-Star Weekend is not that serious of an event. Like like the winning team, the Eastern Conference, 211 points. To 186, like, okay, you understand it's not a serious product, but it's also like what you make of it as well, right? And Scotty was amongst a few first-time All-Stars. I thought he, among that group, stood out to me. Like, I thought he had a better All-Star, for example, than Paolo. He had a better All-Star than like Maxey, for example. And he played really hard in the game, at least in terms of trying on the offensive end. Honestly, there were guys not even trying on the offensive end. Like, I understand not playing defense, but like Luka, Jokic, those guys weren't even trying hard on the offensive end either. So I thought Scotty really relished the moment.
Luka trying to throw it off the backboard to himself was just amazing.
Well, there was also Jokic trying to do like a cool dunk at the end too.
Yeah, they cleared out the runway.
Yeah, they needed to bring out a trampoline, honestly. That was tough.
Oh, man.
No, Scotty, I like that he did his look back dunk. The one where he catches it ahead of the pack and then waits for the defender to come back in. I think it was Devin Booker in this case. And then he dunked it. I mean, he does that in the games as well.
Yeah. No, this was an All-Star game. He probably could have waited a little bit more.
He could have took 23 seconds out of the 24 in the shot clock. No, but I was happy for Scotty. It seems like he was really enjoying it. It's also an opportunity to like go celebrate with your family as well. It's just a cool accomplishment. And again, it's the first.
That's what he said he relished the most, right? Yeah. Getting to spend time with his family at the weekend and, them kind of being able to experience all of that and see him be part of the game.
Yeah. That's. I don't think anyone necessarily said like, hey, I really enjoyed being in Indianapolis, but it's cool. It's about the company that he was with. Okay. So yesterday at practice, there were a couple of things sort of talked about. I think number one of the biggest talking points, because we got to chat with Immanuel Quickley, and there was more of a focus on sort of how he's doing. Because I think at this point, Scotty has done a really great job, and his development is still the most important thing. But we feel really confident about it, and it's like we've seen what we needed to see for the most part, right? I think with Quickley, it's still more of a TBD. It's a contract year for him. There's a question of sort of how much the Raptors should look to invest in him long term. And honestly, it's just we've seen the growing pains of a player who has gone from being a very effective bench piece, spark plug, to being a featured guy. And so that was a big part of the conversation from practice. And we would like to bring you some comments from both Darko and Immanuel Quickley about how he's transitioned to becoming a starter.
It's one thing when you come off the bench and when you play against second unit guys. The other thing is when you're a starter on a team and one of the most important players on a team. Different kind of defenders are guarding you, different kind of coverages, different teammate is setting a screen for you. There is a lot going through his mind. He's trying to, be aware where his teammates are, how to find them, to find a balance between being aggressive and to run the team. And that's not a skill that you obtain over the night and over the course of 15, 20 games. I think time is very, very important there and patience with him to figure those things out.
Yeah, I mean, being in New York, I was probably the fourth guy on the scouting report. Now I'm probably like 1 or 2 or 3 on any given night. So, that's probably different in that way. And just being able to have different ways to score, get my teammates involved, and just like I said, trying to get better so that I can do that.
How big is the learning curve getting into that new role? And what's kind of been the biggest adjustment?
I think the learning curve is just all about your mindset. If you have a mindset that you're going to improve, that you're going to learn through failure, that you are okay with, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, I think your chances to learn and get better grow, and that's what I try to do. The coaching staff is telling me to shoot a lot more. They think I'm passing up a lot of shots. Still learning when to be ultra aggressive and when to get my teammates involved, the balance of it, how to find guys where they want the ball, things like that, flow of the game, rhythm of the game, all while still playing defense at a high level. So it's a lot, but I'm having fun, learning all of it because this is what I wanted. I wanted, to be challenged, and this is what I wanted. So.
All right, Vivek Jacob. Now that we've heard from them, what do you make of Immanuel Quickley so far in his 20 games as a Raptor?
So 20 games as a Raptor so far, he's averaged 16.2 points, 5.8 assists, 4 rebounds. He has shot 40.6% from 3. That's, I think, the big thing that people have wanted, that pull-up shooting, that ability to pull up off the dribble. That's excited fans. The downside is the 2-point shooting, right? He's at 39.7% through those 20 games, and you want to see that have an uptick. Over the course of his career, he has shot a lot better from 2, so you do expect somewhat of a correction. And I think for me overall, what he has said is fair. Through 20 games, you think about what he's experienced. Obviously, he's seen Pascal get dealt. Then there's been the more recent changes with Kelly Olynyk coming in and Ochai Agbaji coming in. And so he's had adjustments to make. And going from being that fourth option to now being the second option, sometimes the third option, sometimes the first option, that's a huge adjustment. And so I do think, hopefully over these next 27 games, we see some improvement, and especially in terms of his aggression. I think he is someone that can be more of a scorer, have more of a score-first mentality. And so striking that balance between playmaking, between scoring, has sort of been a theme since he's become a Raptor. And so I would like to see him take on that onus and take on that scoring load a bit more as we go here in this final third of the season.
Yeah, okay, so if you were to summarize it all, like if you were to give him a general grade based on your expectations of what Quickley was going to do coming to Toronto, is one of the two main pieces coming back for OG Anunoby, versus what he's actually done in his production, what would you give it grade-wise?
I'd probably give him like a B minus.
Oh, B minus, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so this is like... He's meeting expectations, but not by much.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think when you look at that brief stretch that we saw post the OG Anunoby trade. I think fans were genuinely excited. I think we were enjoying watching that team compete, and we saw a lot of the positives that Quickley brings to the table, right? And that was a competitive team. And then you went into this next stretch where now you're searching for more from Quickley. You're searching for leadership from him as well. And I think that's the part that he and the others have to grow into. And they're trying to figure it out in real time. And we're watching them try to figure it out in real time. So I think that has been more of a challenge, and fair enough. So I think that's where maybe his grade has dipped since. Because I think if you were to just look at that brief sample size early, it probably would have been higher. But I think in the game since, especially with some of the weaker performances that he's had, some of the single-digit scoring nights that he's had, and, you know, low teens scoring nights that he's had, I think that's where some of the frustration comes in.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the overall impact, you feel some games you really notice him, and then some games you don't. And I think that that's not uncommon for any bench player, right? And I think when he was coming off the bench, he's having a quiet night, you just kind of like stow it away. Other guys will step up. Starters will do more, whatever. Now that when you become a starter, it's like you so much rides with him. And like sometimes I wish he would come in and almost set the tone in terms of how aggressive he is with his offense. Certain games he's been able to do that, but again, it's kind of a hit or miss kind of thing. Overall, the numbers are good. I think one thing, again, it is still a small sample with only 20 games, but he hasn't been as big of a pull-up three-point threat as maybe I expected it to be. I think coming over from New York, he was at like 40% shooting on pull-up threes. I think since the trade, he's been around 29% from on pull-up threes, which, you know, it's not the biggest difference. You know what I mean? But still, I feel like if you were on paper, you know, bringing him in, it's like you need him to be a pull-up scoring threat, get his own shot a lot of the time. And then that way it'll open up opportunities for other guys. And, of course, the Raptors just were short on perimeter playmaking in general, especially shot making. And you expected him to come in and do that. He hasn't necessarily gone off the ground in that way. I think the other thing that is a little bit worrisome for me is just the two-point percentage. As you mentioned, his career-wise, he's been pretty efficient, for, you know, in terms of inside the arc. But since joining the Raptors, he's I'm pulling up the numbers now. Yeah, 39.7%, as you mentioned earlier. He's a career 47% from two, and you know, in New York at the start of the season, he had 51% inside the arc. We know he's got a killer floater, but what are you seeing from his game in terms of just getting his efficiency back up inside the arc? Besides the fact that he should be a good pull-up three-point shooter, maybe he just has enough time to show it in Toronto.
So I think first with the pull-up three, I think that's where we see some of the struggles in the decision-making. It's like, hey, should I take this shot? Should I move the ball on? Should I be looking to create? And I think when you have this Raptors type of offense where you're being asked to make very quick decisions, you are, and you've, in my viewing of him, I get the sense that he's been premeditated. And just like, hey, I'm just going to like run the play here, as opposed to like, oh, I've got to look, I'm going to take it, you know?
Okay.
And I think we're going to see a lot of thinking until it becomes just a natural part of him running the offense. And so I think that's where the decision-making on the pull-up shooting has hurt him. And then in terms of finishing around the basket, I think for one, he doesn't really know how to do the Nash move and just, you know, maintain his dribble and, you know, take something if it's there, maybe keep searching, right? He does tend to pick up that dribble a bit early, and I think that's what maybe causes him problems. And I think some of it is the adjustment in terms of the big he's been playing with as well, right? He has started with Jakob Poeltl.
Then he got hurt.
Yeah. And then he started with Jonte Porter. Thad. So I think that has impacted things as well. Overall, I think I would like to see him in more actions with Scotty Barnes, right? I think in terms of the long-term outlook of this franchise, right now, those are the two players at 1 and 2. And so you want them to develop as much chemistry as possible to carry into the offseason. You want them to develop an understanding as much as possible. I think the OKC game was a perfect example of what not to do. You look at the fourth quarter, you look at the overtime, there were barely any actions that involved both of them.
There was a lot of Quickley that one.
Yeah.
That one he could definitely notice quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not as much Scotty for that game.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where I think I want to see both of them consistently involved together.
Okay.
And so I think developing that chemistry should be really important going down the stretch here. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you want to maintain what you have in terms of the big picture offense and how you run it, and maybe that's what's impacting some of it. And obviously, RJ has been tremendous, so you're trying to make sure he gets his touches too. So I think in terms of getting the best out of IQ, those are the aspects that he's got to develop. One, with the pull-up three-point shooting, when the look's there, just take it.
Mm-hmm. Just take it, seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, with the dribble, as you're penetrating, keep that dribble alive. Try to get as deep as you can. Try to survey the floor. If it's not there, as long as your dribble is alive, like, you're a threat, right? Don't take that dribble away. And lastly, let's get those reps with Scotty going.
Yeah. You know what's actually funny, listen to this, and we're going to talk about the Bucks later on. We're going to have Seerat, Sohi of the Ringer to come on to just talk about the league in general, but definitely want to take a little bit of time to pause about the Bucks because they keep giving all these like interviews and comments, and it just doesn't sound happy at all. Like, clearly there's an issue there, despite them being like still second in the East. But one of the main conceits with the Bucks is like, okay, Dame and Giannis on paper makes perfect sense. Put them in a pick and roll together, magic is going to happen out of this. And then that's not really what happened. You know what I mean? And I feel like, obviously, Scotty is not on the level of Giannis, and IQ is definitely not on the level of Dame. But it's like almost like a watered down version of that. It's like on paper it makes perfect sense, but in practice it takes a lot of time to figure out everything. It's not as simple as just put them together. It's also about how you occupy the weak side, all that other stuff. I get it, but in general, I totally agree with you. That's the coaching challenge for Darko, is not only to bring the best out of IQ, and by the way, IQ is actually posting career highs in Toronto, but I think the expectation is even higher than that.
Yeah.
But that's the coaching challenge for Darko, is to find ways to get them maximized with each other, and yeah, again, ideally you like to see a 1-2 punch type of thing with Scotty and Quickley, but right now I think Scotty is very much like leagues ahead of the rest of the team, and then other guys are able to step up sometimes with number two, like RJ sometimes steps up with number two. Honestly, more often than not, RJ's second in the team in scoring, if not even first sometimes, but Quickley is like really sometimes there and sometimes he's really low, and how do you find that consistency is really just, again, a coaching challenge to me. Like, do you have confidence that Darko can figure this out?
Well, I think when you look at Darko's reputation, it has been all about development. And so...
And he's developed a fair number of guards, to be fair, as well. Yeah.
And so I think in terms of bringing out different elements of players, obviously we know Desmond Bane is the prime example, right? And Desmond Bane, sort of went to Darko and said, hey, this is what I want to work on. And Darko was pretty direct with him, and he was like, hey, you can do way more than that, and you should be looking to do way more than that. And so I hope that he's having similar conversations with all of the Raptors, right? And I think Quickley, we've talked a lot about his offense, but defensively too, he needs to make strides as an on-ball defender. And I think we've seen him be a good team defender, but I think part of the challenge going forward as well, right, in evaluating this core and this core growing is, okay, there's challenges for RJ Barrett as an on-ball defender. There's challenges for IQ as an on-ball defender. So to be a sustainable core, both of them are going to have to take strides on that end of the floor.
Right. Especially because outside of Scotty and I guess Jacob, there isn't a team defensive structure around to hide certain people. And I don't feel like they're necessarily on paper guys you need to hide. Like, I'm obviously Quickly's a little smaller, a little bit more slender, but I think he's not necessarily a guy you look at you have to hide him. And RJ in particular has no excuses. Right. RJ has the profile to be a good defender as well. So that's up to these guys to continue to improve and grow. And that's why they brought Darko in, to show growth and individual growth in these players. And he got the midseason, so it's a little bit harder to just hit the ground running immediately. But no, I think to me, Quickley has shown enough flashes, really, really good games, that I think, and especially his skill set on paper, makes a lot of sense. But it's about the consistency. And I think my other question to that is just you know, what are you comfortable paying him in the offseason? Because he's a restricted free agent, so the Raptors can match whatever offer comes to him. But is there a number that starts to get you a little bit squeamish about, okay, maybe we don't necessarily want to keep him at that high of a price?
Yeah, I think, you know, when you first sent me this question, I felt like a sweet spot was probably around 4 years, $90 million.
Okay, so that's like 24 year kind of thing.
And the reports that have come out while he was with the Knicks were that he was looking for something in the 25 million per year range. He's
basically there.
He's going to be turning 25.
Mm-hmm.
So he basically wants to be that 25 sitting on 25 mil. And so if you want to give him that, I can see that, right? Like if that, you know, having that 9-figure being like, hey, I made 100 mil, 4 years, 100 mil. If that's what makes him happy, you get it done, right? The other course is, hey, you're a restricted free agent.
Mm-hmm.
You see what's out there, and you just match whatever's out there, and then you just play it how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a bit of a risk in terms of, you know, you don't want a repeat of the Fred situation where you looked at the market, you're like, okay, we feel like we're in control. Now, it's a totally different situation because that was unrestricted. But in that situation, what they couldn't control was a team like Houston coming in and being like, here's the max. No one ever looked at Fred and said, that's a max level player. No offense to Fred. But Houston had the right money and the right situation. And they said, why not? Let's actually go get this guy. And so here's the money. And that kind of took the power away from Toronto in that situation. I don't think Toronto necessarily even had that much power considering he was unrestricted. This is different. He's restricted. But is there like a surprise team out there that you would be worried about? Because I don't know. I mean, there's not that many great young point guards that are available in free agency. You know what I mean? And usually teams retain those guys.
Yeah.
So I'm worried about like if a Detroit or an Orlando jumps in and it's like, here's this huge bag.
Right. Yeah,
and then Toronto has to be in a bad situation where they're like, okay, well, we actually got to match it, or we just let him walk, which in this case would be terrible. We have nobody to replace them.
Of course, yeah. No, I think Detroit is in a similar type of boat as Houston in that because of how much they've lost over the years, they will have to throw a boatload of money, right? And they have the money to do it, so they can just say, here's the money. We want to pair you with Cade and move forward.
Does Detroit seem like the kind of place that would want to do that? Because they also have Ivy. Who's breaking out.
Ivy's been getting minutes and he's been playing well, and so I think that's a question that they have to ask themselves. But to your point about Orlando, in terms of wanting a shooting threat, that shooting from deep is something that they have struggled with on the whole, and so they would look at a Quickley and say, okay, this is someone that can address a major need that we have, and so. I think those are two threats that you have to be mindful of in terms of, you know, maybe taking the money to a place that you don't necessarily want it to go.
Yeah.
At the same time, I don't think the Raptors, you know, go out and make the deal unless they had a good idea of what it was going to take to keep him in Toronto.
I think, you know what, a lot of this is also on Quickley, right? This is why, yes, the remaining end of the season, like we're not looking at the Raptors to do any noise in the playoffs or anything like that, but it's pretty important in terms of the growth of the franchise. And we still have this huge chunk of the year where these guys can continue to grow and show, A, how they fit with each other, B, how they can work towards becoming a winning product down the line. And that's going to influence a lot of like what you're going to pay them generally. Like it's up to Quickley more than anything else, right? Like the more that he's able to find consistency, have those really good games, be effective in the 2-point range, also get back to being a really, really good pull-up 3-point shooter, develop that chemistry with Scottie, that just bumps the price higher and higher for himself. And honestly, that makes the situation better and better for Toronto because the better he plays, the more comfortable you are with like retaining him. But clearly they identified him as one of those guys that they wanted in an OG deal. And so, you know, it's up to him, really. And honestly, when he's on, I really do enjoy his game quite a bit. The skipping, the 3-point like celebration, it makes a lot of sense as to sort of what you know the fit would be. But again, like on paper is just on paper. In practice, right now, it's up and then it's down. It's up and it's down. It's hopefully he gets like 3 out of every 4 games he's good.
And that's to be expected with a young team, right?
Sure. And again, it's a new role for him too.
Yeah, new role and what's been an ever-changing roster since he's come in, and so I think. when you look at Darko's comments at the practice, he was basically calling it the vibe like a training camp, right?
He said this like 4 times now, man. We've done a lot of training, a lot of camping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think when you look at these final 27 games, now I think you want to see just a lot more consistency, right? You have a good idea of what the rotation should look like. You have a good idea of who you're going to be starting with, who's going to be coming off the bench, where your minutes are going to be deployed. And so I think with that, it is fair to ask for more consistency.
Yeah.
And I think if you can get IQ to have a bit of a correction in the 2-point range, from his standpoint, I don't think the next 27 games is going to change too much in terms of the contract offers he gets.
Okay.
Right? But, like, unless he were to somehow come out and average like 30 and 8 the rest of the way.
That'd be ideal.
That would obviously blow the expectations out of the water. And now all of a sudden, like, I think the max he's eligible for with incentives is about 5 years, 145.
Okay,
right?
I don't think it's going to come close.
There's no way it's going to come close to that, right? But in his mind, how close can he get to that, right? What does he do over the next 27 games that really blows expectations out of the water? Like, for me, like I said, I'm currently sitting at the 4 years around 90. I think that's about fair. Because on some level, you're paying for the potential. You're paying for what he's been so far, which so far has been 16, 5, and 4, right? And so, I think it's an interesting challenge for him individually.
Yeah.
And I think everything is now in place to have the consistency to try and bring, at least a 20-point scorer out of him down the stretch.
I mean, hey, honestly, if he reaches that mark, I think we would all feel a lot more comfortable too. This is good. I want to review RJ tomorrow.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's just do some show planning. Yeah, because again, it's really just about the next half, or not the next half, the last third of the season.
Yeah,
and what to watch for. And Quickley for me is like right up there, like if not number 1, number 2 for me.
Yep.
In terms of what to watch for his growth. But I think that was a good discussion. We're gonna take a quick break. Been your host, Willow. You've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, brought to you by Campbell's new Chunky Spicy Soup. When we come back, I want to talk about a veteran, Garrett Temple. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Lou. Yesterday at practice, I was able to get down to get another exclusive, this time with Raptors shooting guard Garrett Temple, 14-year NBA veteran, just to talk, not necessarily about the team, but because it's Black History Month, wanted to talk about his family history and his considerable just track record in activism and just his thoughts, especially based on his role in the union in terms of how the league has been run in the last 5 years or so, because there's been a lot to hammer out. A new CBA, the handling of the bubble. So anyway, this is our conversation with Garrett Temple. Okay, we are down here at Raptors practice. Once again, joining the show, Garrett Temple. Appreciate your time. How was the break for you? We saw you pop up at Dennis's little birthday party.
Yeah, man. The family, my kids, Dennis's kids, Junior turning 5, so that was great to be able to be around them. Obviously, Dennis is my guy, so it was great to see him again. We'll see him again tomorrow, obviously. I'll probably holler at him tonight. But the break was great, man. Much needed. It was my first time in probably the last 6 years not going to All-Star, at least for a day or two, being on the executive committee and having to attend those meetings. So just doing it virtually was nice. We went to Dominican Republic, my wife, my kids, and Jama was actually at the same resort as us, so with his kids and his wife. So that was great. No, it wasn't planned, but I found out after booking that a lot of people were going to DR, and Jama and I ended up at the same resort. Very kid friendly. It was a great time. Great time.
That's awesome, man. That's it's a better story than my break, so we're not going to talk about what I did on my break.
Right.
Okay, so I wanted to chat, a bit about the Raptors, but mostly I actually wanted to talk about this Black History Month. Really wanted to get into your family history, right? And it's a story that you've told a few times, but I would love to have the Toronto audience also understand sort of your background, your history. It's very storied. But actually, just a quick question, because I was chatting with both Masai and then Bobby, just earlier, and I told them I was going to interview you. And I was asking him the question, like, whenever you want to hang it up, whenever you're done, do you want to go front office? Do you want to go in coaching? Like, what do you want to do? Do you still want to be in the game? And if so, like, what do you want to do? Because I feels like they were both confident you can do either one.
Yeah, I'll answer that question first. It's definitely something that's been on my mind, something that I think I'll have, a few opportunities, a couple of opportunities either way. I do want to stay around the game in some capacity. I think that'll be great. My son loves basketball, family loves basketball. The only downside is the travel. It's having a family. It's not easy on a family, on a marriage. So that's something I'm gonna discuss with my wife and my kids. But it's definitely something I've thought about doing. Something I've researched. I've talked to, former players that have gone into the front office, former players that have become coaches, and just see their mindset and see if our values align and how that will work. So it's definitely something I'm thinking about. Front office or coaching. It's really either one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those two are both confident you can do either one. And I think that speaks to the time and the history that you put into the game. So speaking about history, again, because it's Black History Month, really wanted to talk about just your family history in particular. And I wanted to start with your grandfather. All right, Collis. I think, well, I want you to tell this story about sort of him going to LSU and ultimately being denied to go into the master's program and sort of the history there, because it's 3 generations of you guys at LSU now.
Yeah, it's actually, so I'll have to, correct that.
Okay.
Him trying to go to LSU. So he went to, my grandfather, Garrett Temple Sr., went to Southern University, which is the HBCU, the historically Black college in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. In 1930, I want to say, is when he attended there. And he tried to he got his degree in agriculture. And he tried to go get his master's in the late 40s.
Okay.
He tried to attend LSU when he was 30-something years old, late 20s, early 30s. And LSU denied him because he was Black. And Thurgood Marshall had a lawsuit against a few of the public universities in the South that were denying people entrance because of the color of their skin. My grandfather got wind of it. He was about to, I guess, maybe add LSU to the lawsuit. And I don't know how, but the Louisiana legislature found out, and they approached my grandfather and told him, we'll pay for you to, we'll create some type of grant to pay for your master's degree, just as long as you don't put LSU into the into this lawsuit. And my grandfather at that time had 4 kids. My dad is the youngest of 6. He's the only boy, so my dad wasn't born yet. And then my grandfather decided, okay, you know what, Michigan State has a great program that I'd love to go to. So he started going in the summers up to Michigan State, and his school was paid for. And by the time my dad got to age 3 or 4, early 50s, my grandfather had finished, and my dad remembers going to Michigan State to watch my grandfather walk across the stage and get his master's degree.
Wow.
So that's his story, which is an amazing backdrop to my dad's story of becoming his senior year, going to school with white people for the first time in his life.
Right, okay.
As a senior in high school.
Right. And this is in the South.
This is in the South, in Kenwood, Louisiana.
Yeah.
So he was, 16 years old, starting school, 16, 17, first time in his life going to school with white people. If anybody has ever seen the movie, remember the Titans.
Yeah.
He played football and basketball, the football team. You start off workouts before school starts, and they were able to create a bond. He played, he starred on the football team. They went undefeated and won the state championship, just like the movie.
Okay, so hold on, because I read this story, and then I was like, I realized I never watched Remember the Titans. So actually, last night, I took the time out to watch the film just to make sure that we're on the same level. So who is your dad supposed to be, or which character is your dad based off of?
No, he wasn't based off. So the film isn't based off my dad's team. The film is based off a team in Virginia. But my dad, when he first watched the movie, he said,
"This is
exactly how my senior year was."
Okay.
And this, there was, because he went to an all-Black school up until his junior year in high school, so they had a great team. And they had great athletes at the white school as well. And it just so happened that Britney Spears, her dad was the star quarterback.
Wow.
So
it's a small world, man.
Yeah, very small world. They actually had their, I want to say, 50-year reunion 2 years ago.
Okay.
But they won a state championship, and my grandfather had the forethought of understanding what my dad going to LSU would mean to African Americans in Louisiana, but also in the South. So when the governor, then this is the crazy part, it wasn't the head coach that recruited my dad or even the athletic director. It was the governor of the state.
Wow.
That recruited my dad to come play at LSU. And I guess they probably thought they had to, put their best foot forward since they denied my grandfather. And my grandfather,
at least you guys were old.
Yeah,
man.
he put his ego aside and he understood how, like I said, how much this would mean to people that look like us. And he felt like my dad was ready. He had been raised right. And my dad went there, and it wasn't easy for him. He'll tell a lot of stories.
Yeah.
He'll tell a lot of stories about the times he wanted to go back home. He grew up about an hour and a half from LSU's campus. And the guy named David Duke, who was at one point the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, they had a couple of run-ins, verbal run-ins with each other on campus. David Duke was a junior. My dad was a freshman, so...
When you say that, it's like a debate club kind of thing?
Not debate club. No,
they had run up on each other.
So they had something called Free Speech Alley.
Okay.
On campus, and it was right near the Union, and people used to just talk about things.
Okay.
Especially in the 70s, it was a lot to talk about, and people really had their opposing views on certain things. Obviously, and my dad was 6'8" with a big afro. Was very proud of who he was as a black man, and obviously that may have gone against what David Duke's views are. So
I think we know that. Yeah, I think we know that.
But it was a very difficult time for my father, but he would not change it for the world. And he grew a lot as a man and as a person while he was there.
So for you growing up, I guess I'm not sure how much of this you remember or how much of this you were around, but like, what kind of impression did that make on you? The struggles that your family had to go through?
A great deal. Again, like I said, my dad was never the type. My dad and mom, they were never the type to shy away from speaking truth about the social fabric of America, and the things that as black people in America we have to, especially black men. I was raised with my two older brothers. My sister was born when I was 16. So as black men growing up, we wanted to be educated. We wanted to know that we had to do things a little more detailed and better than everybody else in order to make sure we got certain advantages. And, we understood what life was about. So, again, he told us a lot of stories about what happened back then and how him going there has set us up for certain situations. But we understood what his sacrifice meant and the legacy that he was trying to leave.
So you mentioned the importance of education. I think last time we spoke, you mentioned that you were trying to complete your LSATs and maybe go to law school, pursue more education there. We also obviously take a lot of time out of your day to in your involvement with the NBPA. Are these things all directly related? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think so. I think education is a big piece for my family. My dad was the first person to kind of mentioned to me about going to law school. He's been, my dad and mom are both, they pushed me. They've pushed me since I was young.
Yeah.
In school, in everything that I do. My mom has a saying, whatever you do, be the best at it. Do it to the best of your ability. So, I definitely think that's resonated with me, and trying to challenge myself, on that type of level where I have to challenge my mind as well as my body is something that I get from my parents.
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking to the NBPA in particular, I mean, this is something where, if I understand it correctly, you guys aren't even. It's not like you're not doing this for compensation. You're doing this because you want to represent and advance, the players and everything that you guys can do there. And of course, you just got reelected as well to a new term. you know, I think for me, the question is, you know, the new CBA on our end, on the media side, we're still trying to comprehend it, and so we're still trying to like understand, you know, the new nuances that have come into it. From what I understand, it does, and I understand it's a very, very basic understanding, but it's almost like a soft hard cap in a way, right? There's a lot of limitations to what teams can do. Take me through some of the negotiations there in terms of like the players accepting this and some of the, you know, the push and pull factors as to why you guys agreed to certain terms in this current deal.
Yeah. So I mean, the CBA is crazy long, and I can't you know lie and say that I've read the entire thing. But the biggest part is that there were situations where the governors, as well as us, we both enjoyed the area we were in terms of the amount of money we were bringing in as a league, where the league was going as a whole, and we wanted to make sure that there were certain things that we wanted, there were certain things that they wanted. We had negotiables, you know, non-negotiables that we weren't willing to give up, and we did not have to give those up. Hard cap, specifically a hard cap, no hard cap. At the end of the day, that's one thing that makes our league, our players, be able to move, be able to do certain things that they want to do.
Right.
And you know, the players at the end of the day in our game are very recognizable. The fans know them. A lot of times in the NBA, you have fans of teams, but nowadays, a lot of people are more fans of players than they are of teams. So the NBA understands that. It's a business. They want to keep players happy as well as make it profitable for the governors. It's a business as well. So I think Adam understood that, you know, people talk about players, movement, and players having control. At the end of the day, the players are the product, and fans go as we go. So the non-negotiable main thing was hard cap. This was about a year and a half. It was 2 years ago. They really never pushed on any other non-negotiable that we had.
Okay. What about I think there was talk of like maybe they, you know, you get it back to like you can come straight from high school.
Yeah. So there was talk about that. There wasn't something that the players were pushing crazy. That's not something that the owners were pushing crazy.
Okay. So you just left it as is, yeah.
We left it as is. Again, and this is something that can easily be revisited. That's the thing about a CBA. There are amendments. So you want to nail down the things that for sure they wanted, for sure we wanted. You want that to get nailed down. The other things can always happen. You know, because the CBA happened a year ago, doesn't mean, you know, coming out of high school won't happen until the next CBA.
Sure,
that can be changed.
Got you. Well, I think for you as well, I was wanting to ask about just the bubble, right? Because I think that was the time where so much was going on, right? You know, COVID had just like really come on, and there was so much importance. And at that time, there was so much like fear as to like, is it going to be safe, right? What are the logistics? You guys are all just getting put into this whole thing. And I think you spoke out just a little bit about it. I think rightfully so. You were a little nervous in terms of just like how it was all going to be. I mean, take me through some of those conversations back then.
No question. Now, you know, that was probably the most time I've spent on the phone, on Zoom, just trying to get a feel for where we're at as a executive committee. We talked at least once a day. And at the same time, we were trying to find a new executive director. I'm looking at Jennifer Quinn's Walt Disney World Orlando NBA Restart badge, and that makes me think about that.
She also put this here, by the way.
Yeah,
I don't know what this is about.
I'll tell you what that is later.
Okay.
But it was great conversations. It was great to have guys on. Kyle Lowry is not a part of the executive committee, but he was on a lot of calls. Just, you know, we're getting feedback from players and teammates, because at the end of the day, this is our livelihood. Some guys are set for life and didn't need to play another game. Some guys needed their money. Some guys were trying to make a team and wanted to get a chance to play. So you have all of that, all of those dynamics on top of the health, whether or not you can get COVID. We didn't understand the long-term effects. We still don't understand the long-term effects of COVID. I personally everybody had personal situations. I personally had a wife that was pregnant at the time. So, you know, me leaving for 2 months, 3 months, some people that have kids may say, well, it depends on when you left. That might have been the best time for you to leave so she could be by herself. But not wanting to bring back anything. So a big thing for me was making sure the bubble, if we did a bubble, that no people could come in without being tested multiple times, because I did not want to bring anything back to my wife.
Of course.
So it was a lot to talk about, a lot about the restart, a lot about, the money that was going to be taken out. How much money were we going to be able to make at the restart? How much money had we made up until now? Because the escrow and, so many things that are pretty convoluted that needed to be worked out. And I think, you have to applaud Adam for what he was able to do to get that back, and applaud us as players for taking that chance. And I think we were the first, professional team, professional sports.
It was
professional sports league to go back and provide that entertainment at a time where it was needed. It was so needed, man. And it was needed for us as well, loving the game. But when I got back home, I definitely watched. And I understood what that respite was. Was able to give people in a time where, obviously, there were a lot more things more important than basketball going on, but it's always nice to be able to have a little time to just, lay your head down and be entertained.
Well, I know, banter aside, I know the Raptors, you actually played against the Raptors in that series. People don't remember that Raptors-Brooklyn series all that much. Well, I want to ask, too, because this is the most important question I had, and I know that PR is kind of outside right now. I appreciate their patience on this. I think it's an important topic. It was I think it was the NBA in terms of the modern age, we're talking about the last 20, 30 years, biggest moment in terms of NBA players stepping up for activism, right? It was the height of the Black Lives Matter protests, players boycotting games, essentially a wildcat strike by the Magic, by the Bucks, Raptors, Celtics. Game 1, I remember they didn't play it on time. They said, we're not going to come. This is way too much for us right now. As someone who was in the union at that time, how'd you guys handle that? And how'd you guys support the players' rights to do that?
No, it was amazing. And not to mention, we talked about all the things union-wise that was going on. We had so much going on, in the world. As you mentioned, George Floyd and others. So just in general, socially, in America, things were in an uproar, especially for Black America. And that was another reason why I wanted I pushed, I was a proponent of us going down there to be able to speak on things that we cared about, because people were going to watch. We were going to have more eyes than ever before. And I think guys really took advantage of that. And, a friend of mine, George Hill, was a really big proponent of Milwaukee not playing that game. I actually, again, like you said, y'all swept us when I was in Brooklyn, so I was home when they set out of their playoff game. But we were on the phone talking, and we, again, we have a great commissioner that allowed us to do that and found ways around us speaking our truth and being able to voice our opinions on certain things and at least get the message out there. And then we'll go back to playing, but at least the message is out there. They understand how we feel about what's going on. And I think that's the biggest thing of what a protest is supposed to do. It's supposed to shed light on something. Yeah. And then after that, there are certain things that you can do. So for us, being able to do what we did in the bubble and create that, the monies that go towards the certain things they go towards now in terms of minority things, I think that was really big for us. And I agree with you. It was probably a turning point. In our league. I
think, honestly, I guess I've never really thanked an NBA player for doing that, but you guys really stepped up, took command of the situation. And I know there's obviously lots of business partners, everything like that. It's not you can act on everything you want to do all the time, but it was a real important seminal moment in sports. And I just hope that same momentum and that engagement can just be sustained throughout. And I'm sure you feel the same way. But
no question.
We run out of time. We could talk for a long time about this, but I appreciate you as always, man, and best of luck with the rest of the season. Maybe we'll have you on again, and we'll talk more about this subject.
Appreciate you, my guy.
All right, that was the interview with Garrett Temple. Again, I really appreciated his time. Very thoughtful person, as you can tell. His family history is really, really storied, by the way, and I don't think the interview itself even does it justice. You can find a lot more of his conversations. Honestly, he's done a lot of work with Mark Spears in particular of Anscape. So if you just search Garrett Temple and Mark J. Spears. You'll find a lot of great stories, but really, really fascinating man to talk to. And I hope it's not the last time I get to interview Garrett, because I think there's a lot more stories to be told there. But I appreciate his perspective and his time. So we're going to take another break. I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, brought to you by Campbell's new Chunky Spicy Soup. When we come back, let's look at the NBA at large. Welcome back to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wayne Blue. Going to be joined by fill-in co-host Vivek M. Jacob. How you feeling, man? You all right?
I'm good, man.
Do you want the M? Like, do you like when I say Vivek M. Jacob, or you just want to be Vivek Jacob? Like,
I mean, Vivek Jacob is cool.
Okay.
Like, the M is just my middle initial.
Yeah. It's kind of hard. You know? Every great writer has an extra initial in the middle. You know? Yeah, man. What have you been working on these days, by the way? I see your bylines, you know, but I want to give your articles some shine, some plug.
Well,
so
you
you
know,
starting a Substack? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I do my general NBA content for Sportsnet that you can always find, but I kind of wanted to do something Raptors related in my own voice, and like I've got like my Cricket Canada responsibilities now, so I wanted, you know, I didn't want to be accountable to someone else in terms of the consistency and all of that. So I thought once a week is probably something I can commit to, and so I started my own Substack. It's called Raptors in 7, once a week. So I thought that tied in nicely, and you know, had the first post on everything Scotty Barnes.
I saw that.
All the great promise he's shown, a few of the missteps, and we'll see how that goes.
That's a free Substack, right? Anyone can go.
It's free right now. Yeah.
All right, Raptors in 7. I like it. Raptors have played a lot of 7-game series, for sure. Okay, we are also bringing in now to join us on segment 3 is Seerat Sohi of The Ringer. What's going on, Seerat? I'm getting 2019 championship run vibes, the three of us on a podcast again together. So
it does take me back. I'm happy about the takeover.
Yeah, what's going on? Okay, so we wanted to bring you on not to talk about the Raptors because, you know, with all due respect, we did our best today, but there's a lot of more relevant teams around the league right now. And I kind of just wanted to take a time to just look at the contenders, you know, and just the picture there and just sort of see. We understand, obviously, what makes these teams really good. That's why they're, you know, atop the standings. They've got a lot of great players, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe some of the things that may trip up some of these contenders. So I wanted to start in the East with the Bucks in particular, just because it feels like it's like super topical. And I just wanted to get your thoughts first and foremost on like, why are the Bucks giving so many interviews that paint the picture of a really fractured club? Can we start there?
Oh, man, I don't know. I think the low-hanging fruit here would be the Doc Rivers effect. Probably a perfect storm with the NBA All-Star coming up. I saw Giannis sat down with a really interesting interview with Malika Andrews. He also spoke with The Athletic. Giannis is an available guy, you know, and Doc Rivers has done more than he possibly could to make himself available. And I feel like that actually, I think you kind of meant it as a joke in some ways, but I think it kind of cuts to at least the optical problem with the Doc Rivers era so far, and that guy just loves to talk. He loves to talk. He cannot resist a good quip. He is incredibly good at them. That's why the 6 months of Doc Rivers in the media that we got, other than the moments where he was doing an excellent job of painting himself in an incredible light, were really entertaining and illuminating. And maybe that's just what he's supposed to be doing. We know he's a charmer. We know he can woo an ownership group, walk into any interview and seemingly get the job regardless of, you know, what his references might have to say about him. So yeah, I don't know. They might want to, I don't know. I see your point. They might want to go insular for a bit and try to solve these issues from the inside.
Yeah, just you know, no more interviews for a while, I think would really help. By the way, so you mentioned one of the interviews, Giannis spoke to Eric Nam of The Athletic, and he gave a lot of really good quotes in there. All right. I love Giannis's like eternal, like, here's my immigrant grind mentality. And he brings that to every single interview he talks about, especially the ones with Dame. He said in this interview with Eric, quote, I'm his biggest fan, him being Dame. Good or bad, I ride with Dame until the effing end. I ride with Dame. Like I've been saying this over and over again, this is his team. Down the stretch, he's going to get the ball. There's nothing else that we will do. I don't know how else to put it. I don't know what else to say. But at the end of the day, he has to believe it too. Vivek, when you hear that from Giannis about Dame, what are your thoughts? Because, again, that doesn't sound like harmonious. You know, that sounds like he's trying to almost talk to his teammate through the Athletic.
Yes and no. I feel like on some level he's just trying to make Dame feel comfortable as well. And it's like, hey, there's not going to be any issue here in terms of you wanting the ball late, or, you know, I'm not going to be pouting at the end of the game because I didn't get the ball.
He just wants to win.
We are here to see Dame time. Give us Dame time. And so I don't take it so much as that. But, you know, Seerat, the thing I'm interested to know from your perspective is, to this point, I haven't seen enough of a defensive ceiling to see the Bucks as having that championship ceiling. Do you think Doc Rivers can get them there, or can Pat Bev get them there?
Okay. All right. I think we're already seeing the flaws.
Yeah. I think if there's one thing that you do have to give Doc Rivers, it's that his teams have consistently performed on the defensive end, and we are seeing that from Milwaukee. I think last I checked, since Adrian Griffin got fired, they've been a top 6 defense in the NBA, and previous to that, they were in the bottom 10. And it feels like there almost has been a bit of a Goldilocks effect since Doc took over. You know, I think first, you know, you had Mike Budenholzer, who was really stringent. Like he was very stubborn about the way that he approached defense. Brook Lopez was kind of perpetually in a deep drop. That was obviously going to have to change regardless once they traded Drew Holiday. You can't really have Damian Lillard and Brook Lopez as your coverage in a deep drop because Dame can't get around screens the same way. And then the other issue is that Chris Middleton has spent so much time away as well. So then Adrian Griffin to take over this team that has Dame and put in what we are all familiar with as like a very aggressive, trappy, let's bring the bigs up to the top, and try to almost take away everything scheme was just never going to work with this team. And I think the best example of what the Nuggets or what the Bucks should be looking at being defensively is sort of like this versatile conservatism that we saw in their win against the Nuggets, which I think was their best win of the season. But, you know, it was cognizant of their personnel strengths and weaknesses. You had Lopez and Malik Beasley switching pick and rolls, turning Jokic into more of a jump shooter, making sure there was a rim protector. You had, you know, Patrick Beverley, new signing, you know, hedging, not hard hedging, but soft hedging to help Damian Lillard when, you know, the ball is in Jamal Murray's hands. Things like that are somewhere in between like the total aggression that we saw with Griffin and like the total conservatism that we saw with Mike Budenholzer. So I think something about that system though is that that's not the type of system you run when you have incredibly high ceiling defenders. It's a type of system you run when you have a number of guys that need to be protected. And they do have good protectors. They have Giannis, they have Lopez. Frankly, nothing happens for the Bucks if Chris Middleton can't be healthy. So for the purpose of the conversation we're having, we have to slot him in there. You got Pat Bev, you know, Andre Jackson is a guy who I love. So I think if there's anything that's working, it is the way that they're playing defense. But to your question, no, it's not a high ceiling defense. I think it's a defense that can take away a number of things, but has to live with giving away some things as well.
Yeah. Okay, so the Bucks got a lot of problems, a lot of question marks. They're also quite old as well. Probably the oldest team in the league, basically, when you look at their rotation. Elsewhere in the East, I think the Celtics probably is like the opposite of the Bucks in that way. It's like they can play defense however you really want. Third in defense right now. First in offensive efficiency as well. I was actually a little surprised to see that. Didn't think the Pacers would be caught this year, but they're number 2 now. Yeah, first in offense, third in defense. Probably the best top 6 in the entire league when they roll into the playoffs. It'll be Tatum, Brown, Porzingis, Drew Holiday, Derek White, and Al Horford. And then you add a couple more pieces, I suppose. But, like, come on, the top 6 is crazy. Yeah, Seerat, if there is like one weakness for the Celtics, could you find one?
Their only weakness, and I think it's from scanning and trying to find a weakness at this point, is this execution amnesia that just seems to befall them in every inopportune moment. This playing down to their opponents. When they move the ball, they are incredible on offense. And then I think sometimes when they get a lead, they can fall. Tatum and Brown both can still have these bouts where they fall into tunnel vision. But at this point, I mean, man, like this team it's a perfectly constructed basketball team, right? I think we're all a little bit wary of crowning them because of some of the things that we've seen from them in the playoffs, and those things do still present themselves. But I think that it's happening less and less. Like, I think if there's something I could say about the Celtics is that those moments, they're either finding ways to win through them or they're finding ways to clean them up. But, you know, and they're two stars are still relatively young. They've had a lot of playoff experience, so I think we see them as very, very grizzled, but they're still figuring it out. And I think, I don't know, like at this point, what do you that's the only nit you can pick, is that they know what to do and they sometimes don't always do it. And in the throes of a regular season, that is just going to happen with every team. I still need to see it in the playoffs. I'm still a little spooked.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know. There's just not a lot. There's not a lot of weaknesses to find in the Celtics.
V, do you see a weakness?
I mean, along the same lines, potentially, you know, their sort of shot diet and maybe how 3-point happy they can be at times.
They really don't go to the paint that much, but it's also because they're incredible at 3-point shooting. So
yeah, and I think that's what makes you say, okay, well, they've almost like countered the variance game by having so many 3-point shooters where it's like, okay, even if 2-3 guys are off, they'll have another 3-4 guys that are on.
Plus, they have Porzingis to balance out like the little mismatches. They throw him in the post quite a bit, and he does a really, really good job of scoring those mismatches.
And I think you know, a team that potentially can, you know, really make them answer some serious questions is probably like a Miami, you know, where, you know, Spo is going to be ready for them. So it's going to have to take an elite coach, an elite defense to really ask those questions, because that's the level that they're on. But yeah, beyond that, I think the Celtics right now for sure have to be heavy favorites to come out of the East.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely are. I think it's like a championship or bust type of season for them. It's not or bust because they have control over all these guys even next year. But, you know, expectation is clearly for them to make the finals and then actually win the finals this time. Really, the only thing with them is just like, when you think about like top end players who like win finals MVP, like, you know, you look at the last couple, like Steph, you look at obviously Jokic, Kawhi when he's in Toronto, like that high end. I still feel like Tatum sometimes gets there and doesn't always get there in a way that like I would feel so confident about it. But again, we are literally trying to find like the smallest things in this exercise, and there really isn't.
Jaylen Brown has questions, has to answer some questions too, right? Like in terms of
he put on the glove for his left-handed dunk, Vivek. I mean, like we're good.
Like,
what more do you need to see, man?
If he has another postseason where he's got more turnovers than assists, right? Like, then you could see the Celtics kind of coming apart at the seams there. And so I think those top two guys have to answer some questions in terms of consistency, in terms of ball movement, all of that. But that's also why they got Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah, they got a lot of backup.
Yeah, Jalen is averaging a career high in assists this season too. It's not a lot. It's 3.7 assists.
I was gonna say it's a 4.
It's accompanied by his lowest turnover count in a couple of years as well. So he has made some strides in that area. But to your point though, the Celtics are 4-9 when they shoot 32% or less from the 3-point line. So getting them to shoot that number is easier said than done, but I think that is one way that you beat the Celtics.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is going to be the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. I guess my other question with the East before we move on to West is just like Knicks, Sixers, Pacers. I mean, let's throw the Heat in there too, if you suppose. Like, are any of those teams like considered contenders in your mind?
Okay. So Knicks, Sixers, Pacers, Heat. That's interesting.
And Cavs, obviously. And Cavs.
Obviously. And the Cavs. And the Cavs, I think they all have some interesting questions that they have to answer. The Pacers are the ultimate TBA for me right now, just because of how little time that they've had with a healthy Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam and Miles Turner. I have some, even when they're healthy, I have some serious rebounding questions about them. And I do feel like they're a piece away. And I feel like with some of the deals that they've made, sending out Buddy Hield, their new starting lineup should be incredible defensively. You know, you have Andrew Nembhard, and Aaron Nesmith, Siakam, and Turner surrounding Ty Halliburton. Like, you basically have 4+ defenders there. But I worry about the functional spacing. Like, we know how streaky Siakam can be. Andrew Nembhard's having a down year from the 3-point line. Nesmith's been incredible, but I still think that it's going to take him some time to command that respect. And Turner is having a kind of down year from the 3-point line too. Granted, he doesn't need to space the floor as much as a 5. But yeah, I mean, they feel like they are it's become a gap year for them. I feel like they need to retool this off season and really figure out how to build around Ty Halliburton and Siakam. But and I think with the Knicks, the biggest thing I just worry about is the health. Can they get healthy in time for the postseason? And then beyond that, like, how much of a creation burden are we going to have on Jalen Brunson, right? The Bojan trade definitely helps with that, but I still think they're going to need like an actual number 2. Right now, I feel like they have a lot of really nice guys around him, but I think when push comes to shove, like, what do you do when he's just exhausted down the line? Like, you know, like a second round, game 6 sort of situation, that makes me a little nervous.
That's Julius Randle time, baby.
Tom Thibodeau's answer to that is always more.
Exactly.
Well, I guess he's getting them prepared.
But you know, you can't burn the candle on both ends for that long, right? Like, we've seen that with Nick Nurse and the Raptors in the past too. Like, there's a limit to the power of effort, and at a certain point, you start to get diminishing returns.
Yep.
So you guys aren't confident in Julius Randle? Just want to be clear. All-star?
No.
All-star Julius Randle? No?
I mean, he did make the All-Star team. So.
He did? I mean, he's been playing well before he got hurt. It's true.
Yeah. No, he's been playing well.
Yeah.
He's been playing well.
I worry a little bit about their defense once everybody gets healthy, like plugging Randall and Bojan into their starting lineup. You know, obviously having Jalen, OG Anunoby, Isaiah Hartenstein really helps. I think I worry less if Mitchell Robinson gets back healthy. I think he can just clean up so much. If he doesn't, then I'm like, well, are you guys basically going away from your identity in order to find a little bit more like offense around Brunson? I think I kind of have similar questions about Cleveland as well, where I really, really like a lot of the guys that they have, but I'm also just like, okay, what's your ideal playoff closing 5 going to be? Now that Darius Garland and Evan Mobley are back, it's definitely a more dynamic lineup than they had, but the team that they had when they went on their 16-1 run, they were starting Dean Wade, and Jarrett Allen was the only rim runner in that starting lineup. It was just a much more simplified way of creation for Donovan Mitchell, like, who could just basically run pick and rolls around shooters and have a rim runner around him. I think that would have gotten flattened out in the playoffs, but now that those guys are back, I have questions like how much can Mobley develop his range? Will people respect that? Darius Garland, how much can he fit around Donovan Mitchell? And then on the other end, how much are other teams going to try to basically just put him on an island and neutralize this great Cavs defense?
A lot of questions, especially I think last year, the lingering impression for the Cavs was like, damn, they are not ready. The lights were brighter than expected. That was literally from Jarrett Allen.
Yep.
But you know, they've been rolling. I feel like spacing wise is still definitely a concern for me. Like, I just don't think Evan and Jarrett are a great combo in that front. I know Evan has shot the 3 decently since coming back, but not at a volume where people are going to be respecting the shot enough. And they've been playing really well with kind of just one big and 4 spacers around them as well. Yeah, V, like, I guess we didn't hear much about the Sixers. It's really just if Embiid comes back healthy. But even if he does come back healthy, it's not like I'm like super confident in the Sixers, even with him back at full 100% for the playoffs.
I mean, I would if he is healthy for the playoffs, I would be confident enough in them to think that they can make the East Finals as long as they don't have to play the Celtics. Like, I would still think it's a pick-em between them and the Bucks, for example. Like, I think with Melton coming back from injury, Kyle Lowry getting into the mix, I think they'll have some interesting combinations at the guard spot. And I think, obviously, Embiid is going to be Embiid. And Buddy Hield has actually been handling the ball quite a bit since he's come over to Philly.
Okay.
I think that's going to be a significant threat when Embiid has the ball, right? Like, that guy is going to knock down 3 after 3 and open look after open look. So I think the Sixers are prepping, like, for me, when they made the Hield deal, as opposed to waiting, I think there's an expectation that Embiid will be back before the start of the postseason.
Okay.
And I think, they're going to give it a go in this postseason. I think as long as Embiid is at least 80%, I would expect them to compete in the East semis, and then depending on the matchup, come out of it.
Do you have any concerns about them defensively? By the way, fun fact, Buddy Hield has literally never made the playoffs, and he's 31 years old, which is kind of incredible, but I'll be happy for him when he finally breaks the streak.
It's life with the Kings.
Life with the Kings and the Pacers. But, do you have any concerns about them defensively? Because it does feel like, okay, yes, offensively makes a lot more sense, but I don't know. If a lot of it comes down to Embiid, and I also need him to carry the offense as well. And on both ends, endurance-wise, we know Embiid doesn't have that much gas in the tank.
Yeah, no, I mean, they do ask a lot out of him, but again, I think...
Is this where Nick Nurse and his schemes have to come in and carry the day?
But I do think they have missed DeAnthony Melton on that end. I think he's a really, really strong defender at the guard spot. I think Kyle Lowry is going to help them as a team defender. I think that Tobias Harris has improved on the defensive end over the years, and I think he's had important matchups in the playoffs. We saw, when the Raptors lost to the Sixers a couple years ago, he did pretty well in that matchup against Pascal Siakam.
For sure.
So,
physicality was there.
And so I think that's going to be the key for them. Can those guys do enough to, just let Embiid do his thing?
Okay. Moving over to the West. Obviously, the Nuggets, reigning champions. I think for them, there's not much conversation they had because they pretty much have the same team. My question is basically just like their depth. How many guys off that bench do you trust? But realistically, their starting five is awesome. We could just skip over the Nuggets, honestly. I'm not too concerned about them. Minnesota and...
Can we just add Peyton Watson? Can I just say Peyton Watson and then we can move on?
Yeah.
That's it.
No, Peyton
That's it.
He's for sure. Because my question was like, who do you trust the most off their bench? And it was, I think it is Peyton Watson because it wasn't going to be Reggie Jackson or, I don't know, man. I've seen a lot of DeAndre Jordan. I'm like, wow, okay, still. Yeah. But in any case, we'll move to Minnesota, who are actually top of the West right now. Seerat, what's your biggest question for Minnesota in terms of as they head into the playoffs?
Maturity.
Just maturity
more than anything else. Yeah. And I think the Monte Morris trade is a great move for them. Like there's nothing more as like a self-improvement / like just self-immolation junkie. There's nothing that I know. This is actually probably this was a
whoa. Where are you going with this? Let's go.
When Blake was here, actually, I think. But no, there's nothing I love more than somebody who knows exactly what's wrong with them and tries to fix it.
Nice.
And that's exactly what I think Minnesota did. We got there.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Wow. But that's exactly what I think Minnesota did. Like I think adding Monte Morris, who is like one of the lowest turnover backup point guards in the NBA, he obviously has experience with Tim Connolly in their days with Denver, has been a really, really good move for them. But I still think it's going to take internal improvement from the guys that are already there. Like I love the growth that Minnesota has had throughout the season. They've obviously toppled every reasonable expectation you could have had for them, but they have a lot of high voltage guys, and we saw it in the way that things shook out for them at the end of the season last year with the explosion that they had. There's a lot of combustibility. Kyle Anderson's a spicy guy. Rudy Gobert is spicy. Anthony Edwards is spicy. Karl Anthony Towns is, I think, emotionally intelligent, but spicy, emotional at the same time. So I just I hope that they have enough of an internal locker room grounding force when things get real in the playoffs and the pressure gets real, because we've seen it with this team a couple of times this regular season already. Like Anthony Edwards has 9 technical fouls on the season already. He's been really, really getting into it with the referees. Towns has always been one of those guys.
McDaniels punched something randomly last year at a terrible time.
Yes, exactly.
That was wild.
This is what I'm talking about. It's the self-sabotage. It's just the self-sabotage that they kind of have to figure out because they're so talented. They're still really young. So,
they're expensive already.
It's not something. They are expensive. They are expensive. But it's not something I worry about with their core. If they're willing to pay for this core, it's something I worry about 2 years down the line. I think that Edwards and McDaniels will have plenty of time and opportunity to grow. But for this particular season, they just had moments. Like there was a game I think like 2 weeks ago against the Magic where McDaniels plays really good defense on Paolo Banchero at the end of the clock as the game is running down, trying to get the ball back, and then fouls him intentionally with like after you've burnt like 20 seconds on the clock. There's just like you're completely going away from the game plan. You didn't have to do that. So it tells me that there's like a level of like maybe impulsivity there that's still, maybe going to bear itself out when the lights get brighter. So that's the thing that I worry about the most with that team. And obviously their offensive creation, but I think that those things, like they have so much versatility, and with the way that Karl-Anthony Towns is playing and the way that they're utilizing him, I worry about that less.
Yeah, I really appreciate that Minnesota has just realized, and they're like, let's just bring in the most responsible point guards in the league. Like, how about we do that? How about we have Mike Conley and then like essentially a backup Mike Conley and Monte Morris? So yeah.
Well, they're getting killed in a non-Mike Conley minutes, right? So I was like, okay, this
smart,
is what we gotta do. We need Mike Conley all the time.
They just need organization, because the thing is, like, a lot of like offenses and things like that, like, you just need people in the right places and actually just run your stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to seeing how they handle the challenge of the playoffs.
No, so this was never going to happen, but I would have loved if not Monte Morris, if it ended up being Kyle Lowry and having Mike Conley and Kyle Lowry as the two guys like shepherding.
Just full circle.
I'm sure Kyle would have loved to back up Mike again. He's like, again, still after all this time.
Kyle might be a little too spicy. I think Kyle is perfect in Philadelphia, where they could use a little bit more of that.
Really is. Okay, OKC. Vivek, I'll turn to you. Obviously, they're having an amazing season. Shea, MVP candidate. Number 2 in the Bontemps Straw poll. You know what I mean? Sick poll. Love that poll. My favorite polls. Do you have a issue to pick with OKC?
If I had a bone to pick with them, it's maybe just, can they deal with the physicality inside in the postseason?
Okay. We did see Jakob Poeltl put a hurting on them, which is kind of hilarious, but.
Yeah, and so if you're going up against a guy like Jokic, if you've got two bigs like Kat and Gobert, obviously if you got to deal with Anthony Davis and LeBron James, I think those are where you could see some issues. I am also curious to see, Shea is a very slithery guy who gets a lot of calls, and I'm curious to see how that plays out in the postseason. And him getting, obviously, he's played in that type of setting before, but I think it'll be interesting to see how this version of Shea plays out. And, I have no doubt that he'll be a success, but being that superstar MVP type level is another challenge in the playoffs. And so I think those are the two things I'm looking to see. Will he get enough support? It's one thing to get it in the regular season from, Jay Williams and Chet Holmgren, but I think now in the postseason, if I were to compare Minnesota and OKC, I like that Minnesota at least has that experience from last year to look back on in that series against the Nuggets. The way they blew that game against the Lakers in the play-in, where realistically they should have won that game, then the Lakers just closed it out in the fourth quarter. So I think those lessons that they got from last year will serve them well now. And I don't think OKC has had those lessons yet.
Okay. I like that. It's interesting. I'm going to be certainly the lack of secondary scoring, I think, for me, like, maybe we'll see it. I think the playoffs is an opportunity for guys to really emerge, but they do feel like so young. And especially, again, going back to when the Raptors played OKC, they did a really good job shutting down Shea. And the first half, when the other guys weren't making threes, like, it was easy, even for the Raptors, to build a big lead against them. Now, of course, they ultimately won that game. They showed a lot of resilience, but still, it was a lot of, like, Lou Dort made a bunch of big threes, and, like, Josh Giddey made plays, and I'm like,
and teams will live with that in the postseason. It's like, hey, if Lou Dort and Josh Giddey end up making 6 to 8 combined threes in a game, and we lose one game like that, I don't think, teams will look at that and say, we're not going to lose 4 games like that in the series.
I was like Chris Tucker with Don Cheadle. I was like, ooh, this fake. I was burning that $100 bill. That was not real. The Clippers, I feel like I had a really hard time picking holes in the Clippers. And Seerat, I know you're a longtime Clipper observer. Do you see anything with the Clippers besides, obviously, yes, these guys have injury track records, and if they get hurt, obviously their chances get derailed. But besides that, like in terms of actual roster build, the talent, the people they got on the roster, is there any concerns for you for the Clippers?
Yeah. I have one concern for the Clippers that I think it could figure heavily in the Western Conference. Their size. I think if you look at the teams that have given them trouble, all of them have something in common. They play huge front lines. Like the teams that they as a healthy unit have lost to have been the Cavaliers, the Lakers, the Celtics, the Pelicans, and the Timberwolves.
Minnesota bullied them before the break.
Minnesota's bullied them twice. And that's the only team in the NBA to have done that. And I think that is the one issue that I see with them. I think it's just a lot for Vivek Jacob to be asked to handle a too big front line alone. And this is part of the size that they sort of relinquished in the James Harden trade, giving up Nicholas Batum, giving up Robert Covington, giving up Marcus Morris. I think for the most part, Clippers fans are kind of happy that Ty Lue doesn't get to lean on Marcus Morris quite as much as he used to. But I think that in some of the losses, we're seeing why he did that, because right now it seems like when they get bullied, their number one option is to try to turn the tables on you and play small. Sometimes that can work, but we've also seen a number of times this season that it hasn't worked quite as well. So that's the number one thing that concerns me. Like when I look at the Clippers' trajectory through the playoffs, the biggest thing that I'm wondering about is the matchups that they'll get. And then if they'll get some shooting luck, or maybe if they can pick up somebody in the buyout market. They can't pick anybody who already made more than the non-tax player mid-level because of the new CBA first apron rules. And we obviously know the Clippers have an incredible payroll with the stars that they have on their team. But yeah, I mean, beyond that, they're really good. They're really deep. They execute their offense well. I think when they try, they're a good defense. They're a really, really good defensive team. They're not always going to try. They're pretty old. I don't really care about that in the regular season. But yeah, it's just that, and they don't have guys that you can really tenably play together as a too big lineup. You can't really play Mason Plumlee and Zubac together without completely killing your spacing. I don't even think that that's something that most coaches would try. If we do see them in the playoffs, I think we know that something's gone horribly wrong.
Something's gone really wrong.
Yeah. I think Kobe Brown, their rookie, is a guy who's really somebody that they wanted to potentially be able to solve that problem, but he's just a little too raw. He's got the size for it, but he's just not quite there yet. So that's the one thing with the Clippers.
I think maybe going back to the 2019 thing that we started on, it's just I don't know. I have this ultimate faith in Kawhi to just be just go ahead and do it. Again, this is 5 years ago, but it's okay, Giannis is a huge problem. Guess what? He's going to guard Giannis, and it's going to be okay. We're going to have rebounding issues sometimes when we have our certain lineups out there. It's okay. Boardman gets paid. You know what I mean? I'm hoping that playoffs come around, Kawhi just takes up to the next level and solves some of that at least, because
yeah.
I think we all just want to see Kawhi healthy.
That he can do that against. Yeah. Beyond anything else. Yeah. I think there are a couple of guys that he can do that against. I think that if you put him on Anthony Davis, that's fine. I think that Anthony Davis is pretty easily bothered by high pressure defense and size. I think through the course of a 7-game series, if he is guarding Karl Anthony Towns, I will bet on Karl Anthony Towns cowering more than I will bet on by game 7, game 6. But Zion? No.
Okay.
That's, you know what I mean? There's a couple of guys where I'm just no, that's because you have to take his health into account when you think about these things too.
The Pelicans are an interesting one. I didn't really make those lists, but I watched that one where the Pelicans went into Staples or went into crypto and actually beat the Clippers. And I was just dude, there's just a walking mismatch at every position. They're really, really hard to account for. Perimeter scoring wise, it's a lot of relying on CJ McCollum. But I don't know, the amount of pressure they put on you with their size, because they have skill at, in Brandon Ingram, who's so tall. And they have skill in Zion, who is so unique in the way he's like just like a boulder, just like charging at you, always getting to the rim. I don't know. I ultimately don't trust. Oh, of course, JV's a battering ram in the middle of it all, but I don't trust the Pelicans as like a contender or anything like that. But I don't know. Like they're a really tough matchup. I'm sure a lot of teams don't want to play them.
And they've got depth, right? Like
they do have depth.
When you look at, you got Trey Murphy as an option. You've got Najee Marshall as an option. You've got, Jose Alvarado coming off the bench. So I feel like for them, one of the measures I look for in being able to cause serious playoff problems is, can you be sort of that Swiss Army knife, and can you just match up with teams in different ways? And I think they are one of the teams that you look at. It's like, oh, okay, we got some size to deal with. Well, here's JV. We got to play a bit of bully ball. There's Zion.
Yeah. We got to play against a team. We got to switch a lot. Here's Larry Nance. Like,
exactly.
They have options.
So I think from that standpoint, they're going to be a very tough out. But again, I think the experience and all of that, you probably, if they end up playing, the Clippers, the Nuggets, then I think that's going to be a problem for them. Seerat, I'm curious. Recently, I believe it was Brandon Pajemski talking about Steve Kerr looking at the standings and saying their goal is to catch one of the Pelicans or the Suns, get into that 5 or 6 spot, and avoid the play-in. They're 5 games out right now. Have you seen enough from the Warriors in that sort of stretch right before the All-Star break? Obviously, they had that one game where they blew a big lead against the Clippers, but since they've kind of shifted younger, and Draymond has really stepped up to the plate, they've played some good basketball. Do you see them as a team on the rise now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they've had the second best net rating in the NBA since Draymond Green has returned. And I mean, that's kind of what it all comes down to, right? Like how much at this point can you bank on Draymond Green? They have to because of how much he does for them. I think we've seen that with, just their performance since he's been back. He unlocks so much for them. Steph Curry becomes immediately a better shooter when Draymond Green is playing alongside him. He makes the Kuminga-Wiggins duo actually tenable to play together, which is so important for their frontline defense, especially if they're going to be playing a lot of perimeter-oriented guys. He's just, and he's their brain. He's their brain on offense and defense. Like, they just don't go without him. You've got some good growth. Like, Pajemski's been awesome. I think Trace Jackson-Davis is getting better by the game. Lester Quinones just kind of came out of nowhere. I think he just got converted to a regular season contract after being a two-way guy a couple days ago. So things are definitely starting to work out in their favor. Having Gary Payton be healthy, I think, is huge for them. It just unlocks a lot of different lineup combinations for them. They can go smaller. He can always guard the best perimeter player or the best forward, the best anybody on the team. He's easily their best isolation defender. So they've definitely got a lot of things going for them. But man, I'm also just like, it's tough. It's tough to really put a lot of faith in this team, given what we've seen so far with like this high wire act tightrope that Draymond Green is walking, and that they're walking with Draymond Green, like just like the podcast, the some of the stuff that you hear on the podium, the whole like, if Nurkic hadn't fallen down and stayed on the ground, if I punched him once I punched him in the face, this whole suspension thing wouldn't have happened, which was just like, dude, oh my God, he's on
like, man. He's on
like gaslighting, like the gaslighting is crazy. Him. Like, oh my God, like it was just like, it just shows you that like ultimately at this point, like from a psychological perspective, nobody changes in the course of like, employment mandated therapy. At the end of the day, this guy right now is who he is
in the span of a month.
In the span, yeah, like these are lifelong things that we're talking about with him. So he is just, like this is what they have to deal with, and if he can kind of keep it together in an interesting way, I think sometimes it's worked out really in their favor. I think he's finding other ways to like release this intensity that he has, and it's been really fun to watch him just like be this like tongue wagging, really strange heel. I love when the NBA has a legitimate villain, so long as they're not actually physically hurting people. Right. If he can walk that line, it's a lot of fun. And I think it he does, right? Like you can't like necessarily count on him always walking that line. They need it's always the same old story for them, right? Like they need his edge.
They do need his edge. You know what? Honestly, Seerat, I appreciate you coming on because you took this pod to places that I wasn't expecting to today. So I appreciate you joining us as always. But yeah, it's a good look at the rest of the league and the playoff picture because, again, you know, Rap's not going to be in it. So, Seerat, I appreciate you. All right, we're going to let you go.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, guys.
That's Seerat Sohi of The Ringer. Hey, quickly before we go, I've been thinking about this. I formulated it. Time now for the spicy take of the day. Brought to you by new Chunky Spicy Soup. Are you ready to get fired up? Here's my spicy take.
Okay.
Doc Rivers is catching way too much heat right now. Look, I understand that they're 3-7 since he took over, and they were with 31-13 when he was brought on. But the amount of like hate and all the things built into it already, like he's the number one thing on Twitter right now. When you look at the NBA, it's just like people blaming Doc, the whole JJ Redick conversation around Doc. And other players maybe jumping into that. Like, I get it. He doesn't have a great history. We've made fun of Doc on this podcast before. But at least wait to let him blow the 3-1 lead first. You know what I mean? Like, if you're so confident it's going to happen, just wait till it happens there. Like, right now, if the Bucks fail this season, Doc is not the main reason.
Not a doctor.
It's Dame and it's Giannis. And it's the rest of the guys on that team. You know, like, the fact that Doc is there and he's taking all this heat, it's like, what about the fact that Chris Middleton doesn't play all that much and he just continues to not be at the same level he was, you know, that we've seen when he won the championship, for example? What about Brook Lopez looking increasingly older? Bobby Portis, you know, like same kind of deal. The roster construction looking old. It's not just Doc, man. I mean, and we're just like, he can't just take the fall for the whole thing, especially because he just got there, man.
Yeah.
You know, not the quotes, whatever. The quotes, that's on him. But like the problem in the court, like we're jumping ahead of the gun, blaming Doc already. That's all. That's my spicy take.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually not super spicy.
Okay.
I think relative to what everyone is saying.
That's Alex Wong spicy? Is that mild?
No, it's more than a mild. I'll give you that.
Okay, all right.
But I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to say. I think when you look at, you mentioned the roster construction, you look at the decisions that influenced moving on from a Dante DiVincenzo, and you look at the things that he's doing with the Knicks. You look at what Grayson Allen is bringing to the table with the Phoenix Suns. Like, those were key losses too. Like, yeah, we could talk about Drew Holiday and the loss that is on the defensive end. But in terms of the depth, right? Like, the fact that, you know, when we were talking to Seerat, like, we went from talking about Middleton to Andre Jackson real quick. So,
yeah,
I think that is more of the problem that the Milwaukee Bucks face right now. And that part of it is not on Doc. Now, is he helping himself with some of the stuff that he is saying? No.
Yeah.
Should he show more accountability and just own certain situations?
What does he want to do? Like, he just got there. Like, he's going to be like, yo, this is all my fault. Sorry, guys. I built this roster. Sorry, these guys are old because of me. Sorry that Dame is not necessarily happy here. Like, you know, like, it's a lot of things.
But also
when
you're, you know, just new to a team and you're building relationships, I think when you lose that final game before the All-Star break, just take the L and say, hey, we weren't prepared, whatever, you know, and take it top down. As opposed to just being like, oh, we had some guys here, we had some guys in Cabo, you know?
He does love a little quote. He does love a little quote. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I think he doesn't help himself. But at the same time, you know, when you look at recent history, like, do I think that the Sixers lost to Boston because of him? Not really. Like, they had the lead, and then James Harden went, you know, playoff James Harden. Yeah. Like, you look at his box scores from game 6 and 7. Like, he was miserable.
Yeah.
That's why they lost.
Wow. I think we're the only program to defend Doc today. That's why it was a spicy take. That's all. I just think, look, listen, we'll have plenty of time if it's going to go the way it goes to hit on Doc. But this is jumping the gun already. But anyway, we're going to take our last break of the day. I've been your host, Will Lou. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, brought to you by Campbell's new Chunky Spicy Soup. Welcome back to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Will Lou. Continue to be joined by fill-in co-host Big V, Vivek Jacob, who will also be co-hosting The Raptors Show with me tomorrow, as well as Blake Murphy takes a well-deserved 2-week break here. Blake, I hope you are on a beach somewhere, reading a book, watching wrestling, doing the things that you really love. Okay, really quickly, before we talk about the game tonight, Just a couple notes about that game. So first off, the game is at 7 p.m. Normally, when it tips off in Toronto, it's at 7:30, but it's at 7 p.m. tonight. It's also Caribbean Heritage Night, which last year was really, really fun. Raptors beat the Pelicans that night, and a lot of people got doubles.
Yep.
Introduced to doubles for the first time, including friend of the program, Matt Devlin. That was really awesome. And of course, this being the Brooklyn Nets, Dennis Schroeder will be returning to Toronto since for the first time since getting traded. The Raptors will be looking to get their first win in the division. Hopefully, they do that before March comes around. But yeah, V, real quickly, you got a favorite Dennis Schroeder moment as a Raptor? Other than him coming on the show all the time, you know?
Yeah. You know, this will tell you how much of a memory it was. But he did have that one amazing pass where he dummied a guy.
Yeah.
And
he was a pretty slick passer for sure.
Yeah. So I think he had some slick passes in his time. I'll probably go with that. Obviously, you know, I respect the soccer fans. So he's a big soccer fan.
Right.
You've had some conversations with him about that. So, yeah, shout out to Dennis.
Yo, this guy he got guys like Mbappe and like Ashraf Hakimi to be doing his celebration.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's crazy.
Yeah. Good for Dennis, man. I'll be looking forward to seeing Dennis again and just catching up with him.
Yeah, you sweet.
That's my favorite Dennis Schroeder moment, actually, is just that little clip, man. Can't believe that that will now have to live on. But hopefully we get one more Dennis interview as well. Maybe we'll just catch up on what he's been going through. But, of course, it's All-Star break, got traded, busy time in his life. Anyway, speaking of that game, time now for Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. Take a chance. The line tonight, Raptors favored by 1.5. Good to note here, clean bill of health for both clubs. So you will get to see the full strength Brooklyn Nets versus the full strength Toronto Raptors. Two teams maybe, hopefully, you know, trying to get into that play-in range and doing something there, but ultimately both having disappointing seasons. If you looked at this as a key matchup, is there a key matchup for you on paper in this one, Vivek Jacob?
I mean, we got Ben Simmons healthy, so maybe he gets a look at Scotty Barnes.
To do what?
To defend him.
Oh, okay. All right. Interesting.
You know, we can obviously that's where
key matchup is a starter versus the bench man.
I mean, that's the matchup in terms of defensively who you'd want to see, right? Like I think that would present theoretically the biggest challenge to Scotty and how he handles that. I think, you know, who the Raptors put on Mikal Bridges will be interesting.
Yeah, he did torch the Raptors a little bit. Last time the Raptors put the Nets.
Yeah, so I think can RJ Barrett take that challenge and do something with it? That would be nice to see. You know, got torched by his brother, so hopefully that changes now. But we'll see. Beyond that, I think this is. I will say I do think this is a game the Raptors should win.
Okay, because it's at home.
Yeah, because they're at home. The Nets have lost 5 of 6. The only win came against San Antonio. The Raptors can't say much about that because they did get stomped on by San Antonio.
By 30. Yeah.
But I do think if they can come out with the right energy and show some inspiration from, you know, talking to GSP, they can come out with a W.
There you go. Show that fighting spirit, man.
Yeah.
Darko continuously coming up with creative things to do in practice. Because, you know, they've had like 4 training camps. So, you know, you got to keep it fresh. Anyway, yeah. I actually don't like this for the Raptors. I feel like the Nets can switch a lot and neutralize a lot of what the Raptors want to do offensively. And they also have a really good shot blocker in the paint. But anyway, that's Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. Take a chance. And that does it for us today. I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, brought to you by Campbell's new Chunky Spicy Soup. It's time to get fired up. Make sure you find The Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. And please rate and review the program. Big thanks to producers. I'm a man, our board producer, Derek Brandale, Jennifer Rolnick, David Sis, Jared Manatad, helping behind the scenes. Big thanks to... All right, you know what? No thanks to Derek. Take that back, all right? Thanks to Vivek Jacob for co-hosting. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks to Seerat Sohi for calling in. Garrett Temple for speaking with me yesterday, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.